Okay, great. So let me go ahead and introduce who I am. A lot of you know who I am, but I'm Mike Minard, and I'm CEO and owner of Delta Media Group. And Victor, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Victor Lund, and I'm the CEO of WAV Group, co-founder of the company with Marilyn Wilson. We have two other partners, David Gumper, who manages a lot of our technology client needs. He does all of our RFPs for broker websites and stuff like that. And I also have Kevin Hawkins, who runs WAV Group Communications. So the four of us, along with our staff, are just trying to keep things, the wheels on the bus, so to speak, as we go through these challenging times. So thanks for having me here, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you could join us. And before we get going, I wanted to mention that the reason why I really wanted to do this is because obviously there's a lot of questions going on right now, but I started putting out some articles. I put 2 out already, and I have another one that will drop tonight, just on things that businesses can pay attention to. And there's just a lot of conversation going on and a lot of planning. And I thought, wow, it'd be good for Victor and I to get on a webinar here and really share kind of what we're seeing, what's going on. I'll be heavy on the data side and the analytics. That's just kind of me. But I think Victor brings a good perspective too on the overall technology, the overall business side. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump in with this, Victor. Do you want to go ahead and start off with this slide?
Yeah, sure. So, I prepared this list because I thought it would be helpful. And Noel, I guess if you and Mike are going to send the recording, maybe you could send this checklist along with it. But this is a grouping of information that I've asked people to provide to me about things that real estate agents are doing to kind of prepare for an onslaught of business, which is going to happen as soon as these restraints are lifted on our industry. So, we've heard from real estate agents that clients are very receptive to receiving their calls. So any of the past clients should definitely be called on. This is an enormous opportunity for agents to clean up their CRM, especially in areas like tagging, groups, and labels. So every customer should sort of be tied to a theme of some type. So when you're doing any kind of marketing later on, your CRM is prepared and everybody is sort of in the right basket. So you can send the right kind of information to the right people at the right time. For example, if you've represented somebody as a buyer versus represented them as a seller, tag them differently. And that way you can say, hey, it was really great working with you to list your home, or hey, it was really great working with you to go out and find your home, et cetera, et cetera. Tidying up the task lists and processes. This is really something that teams have been reporting to us. So they're kind of going through every operational component of how they operate their team, and whatever task lists that they have, they're formalizing those and reviewing them, looking at what works, what doesn't work, and then making that process better. A lot of people are getting their videos dialed in for social media marketing. I was able to attend the Delta Media webinar yesterday on virtual showings. I can tell you that the virtual showings that are happening here in California are over the top. People are still closing property. We've found that some buyers have gotten a little aggressive, and like one situation I read about this morning, it was on a $5.5 million listing. The buyer withdrew. And then the second buyer came in, who had a very compelling offer, came in, but lowered their offer by $500,000, and the seller accepted it. So there are some things happening right now, and it might be a good short-term opportunity for buyers. So you can definitely communicate that. A lot of people are exercising, which is really great news. A lot of times workers forget that they're athletes too, and we don't exercise as much. So I know I've dropped a few pounds. I'm pretty excited about that. Having these online meetings, things like what we're doing right now to sharpen the saw and improve your knowledge of technology, those types of experiences are really helping. It also builds some personal connection and some communal connection, which is pretty good. Reworking your listing presentation is a solid one that came up many times. People are stacking up their closings, which is kind of interesting. They're getting everything ready, so all they have to do is close when they can. team meetings we talked about. They're going back and calling all their leads for the last 90 days, going through all the drip email components that are in the CRM and reading them and tightening them up and making little changes where possible. Refreshing banner ads for those people who are doing banner advertising. Updating your headshots, which is a great idea. Reviewing budgets, again, reviewing what's not working. And some agents are creating what they call a top 100 client list, which I thought was really cool. And then some agents are just, writing notes to their clients and sending them out. So I think all of these things are things that we would want to do in the day-to-day, in our day-to-day lives anyway. But, for whatever reason, these tasks, which are vital to being successful in real estate, kind of fall to the bottom of the list. Clients come first, and we forget to get back and do these things. So it's a refreshing time to do that. And I encourage everyone to share these things with their agents and start doing some of these things that'll make their business perform a lot more effectively in the future when this problem eases up.
Yeah, and I would add too, Victor, that an hour and a half ago, I got off a webinar that we were doing for sales associates, and it was about using Facebook Live in an open house. And it was just amazing, the comments, how much those agents enjoyed the tips that were given. And we did it as just like a Q&A with 3 agents, 3 realtors that have done them. And hey, here's what we've learned and all that. And then I do want to add as well, for those of you that are interested, because I was shocked at how well that webinar went, and how well it was received, and the comments afterwards, and the excitement that the agents have to have something tangible they could be working on. And but we're going to be doing additional webinars this coming week on other platforms as well that can be utilized even outside of Facebook Live. So, and the agents were pretty stoked about that, about being able to see that. So it's good to see that excitement and that activity.
Yeah, I can tell you, I personally am a new TikTok user.
Awesome. So yeah, we're gonna see that stuff change. And hey, let me add one more thing too. Is I think one of the, if you will, dare I say, a good thing coming out of this is the adoption of technology. And I think that the industry is being forced to adopt technology, and they're doing it. So if we want to try and look at a positive, if you will, dare I say that it's, that's a positive that I think can come out of this from the tech side. But I do want to mention, again, what I had mentioned at the start of this is the reason that I wanted to do this is because I put out a couple articles on what I'm seeing and some data points that all of you could be watching. And I've gotten tremendous feedback on that. I have a 3rd article dropping tonight. But all of those articles, you could find them. I'm tagging them all the same at this URL. We'll send out the video later and a link to this so you have it. But this is what I'm going to share is a little more in depth to some of the things that I've shared in those articles. But I did want to go over just some metrics of some things that you could pay attention to. And what I want to share is that really what I've paid attention to for a long time, actually for 19 years, I've tracked this type of data. So it's not like this is something I threw together that, wow, here's an opportunity, let me do a webinar. I've been tracking this data for 19 years because we look at the trending data with changes we do or the industry to know what's coming up. And I don't talk about it much, I just use it internally. But here's the data. This is a good snapshot of a typical real estate firm. This is one example, and I'll explain why I only did one, but this is one example of traffic since January 18th by month. And this is for organic search. And the
Can you
blue
talk about that for a second? Mike, I don't think everybody understands what organic search is. And this is one of the areas that we've kind of focused on in broker website effectiveness studies we've done in the past. So do you want to explain organic search and then talk about the primary keywords that brokers should see when they're looking at their Google Analytics for organic search?
Yeah, so here's why I focus on organic search. So organic search, to start with, is any traffic going to your website that originated from a search engine such as Google. So if someone Googles something and they find a result and they click through to your website, that would be a visitor or a session from organic search. So that's a traffic source. And Google Analytics gives you the ability to see that segmented out. Now, many of you on here, you may have a technical person that pays attention to that, or a marketing person, but I do have to say these are reports that you should probably see about once a month and pay attention to, because
So,
here's
an
why I
organic
highlight.
search example would be like somebody going to and typing in Berkshire Hathaway home sale, right?
Yeah, that would be a good example, or homes for sale near me, or a behavior that we see a lot today is when someone drives by a property that's for sale, yes, the real estate sign drives those calls, but unfortunately the reality today is it drives that to a search. Someone searches the address typically to get more photos or more information. So those are all examples of organic search. Even homes for sale in San Luis Obispo, is another example. So again, just all search is done. The reason why we track this and we really pay attention to this is because, to me, organic search has proven to be a leading indicator of what's going on in a market. And it can be, so in this case, here are the numbers as we're seeing it, a 26% drop in organic search traffic in March. So that's for the month as a whole. But what that means is, in the past, so far this week, as of last night at midnight, there's a 35% drop in organic search traffic this week compared to 5 weeks ago. Now you have to keep
Which
in
is
mind,
ironically almost exactly the amount of the stock market drop.
hopefully it goes up, but ironically though, even though it's just a drop, we have to remember that the traffic should be growing right now. So really the reality is, as we have our projections and our numbers that we've been tracking over time, in reality, I'm tracking about a 41% drop in organic search traffic this week compared to what we were projecting it should have been at. So, and that's what's illustrated in the graph to the right. Red is where we had anticipated it would be, and blue is the reality of things. So really, so that's just what's going on.
Lift,
and
your seasonal lift hasn't happened
but
yet.
here's
right?
why I'm signaling out organic search, is to talk about consumer behavior. If you have people that are active with you and they're actively looking at properties, they probably still are. But new activity, the people that would go do a search and they haven't really engaged with you yet, that has decreased. And we're seeing it. And again, I have more data, but I think this gives you an idea of what's happening. But I want to point something else out too, to kind of warn how you look at these numbers, is as we look at these numbers, here's a trending that I do. And I'll share a little bit more on this trending in a few minutes. But I do what's called rate of change trending. And basically what this means, look at that green line on there. And that green line it's called a 12-12 trend. And I'll show you where these resources are so you can learn more about this type of trending. But basically, a lot of financial analysts will use this type of trending data. I use it also for web traffic. So in this case, green is always above 0, which that means traffic has been growing for the past 3 years, or 2.5 years in this case. January 2017 through March, it's been growing. And in that March is projected through the end of the month, given the current trend. So this is all positive, good sign. But you do see there that the green line is going down a little bit. That means that growth is slowing. So in this case, for this company, through 2017 and 18, and especially in 19, growth was slowing. What was funny was I had a conversation with this company in, it was early 2019, towards mid 2019, and they were feeling it. And I'm like, yeah, I see it in your data. Let me show you some charts. They're like, okay, that makes sense. But the blue line is what's called a 3-12 trend. And for anyone that's familiar with this type of trending, you would know that when that blue line goes above the green, it's going to start pulling it up. And the higher it is, the harder it's going to pull the trend up. So that blue line being, at least in the past year, going up like a rocket was a good thing. And I have, that's what I'm showing right here. So in this time period here, where it's really going up, that's where you see the traffic really starting to grow. And if you were to talk to this company today, they would say, if you would talk to them 4 weeks ago, they would have said 2020 is going to be the best year. I mean, we're slammed. It's so busy. And we were projecting that it was going to continue that trend. So let me just touch on that. So why were we seeing this? And you have to think through of your data. The reason we were seeing that decline, and I have some other charts, I don't know if I have them on here, but I have some other charts. It was because of inventory constraints. So a lot of times you can see a decrease, especially in organic search traffic, because there's not much inventory. And we definitely see that trending, that when inventory gets tight, the new searches and the traffic goes down a little bit. But we'll also see other things pick up, like market watch reports if you have them, people wanting to see those, or new listing notifications, things like that. So I only point this out because you have to keep things in perspective with your traffic as it goes down, because again, with those projections, here's going out through till April, this is what I was projecting. I was projecting the red to be, the organic search traffic to be this high. So in this company's case, nearly 150,000 sessions a month from organic search traffic. And I want to stress, if this week's trend continues, in other words, and search traffic is way down this week to real estate websites from organic search. If that continues, this is what April would look like. So I think everyone needs to pay attention to that. Now, I don't think it will. As a matter of fact, this is where I'm anticipating. That's not flat, it's up slightly. But basically what this data, if you could see the weekly data, it dips down and then it starts picking back up. Actually, I was on a webinar just a couple of days ago with ITR Economics, who does this modeling, and they were talking that what he expects is not a U-shaped trough. In other words, like with what we're dealing with coronavirus, he doesn't expect it to be a slow, like the market goes down and then it's going to be slow coming back up. He actually expects it to be a V, where it shoots down, which we're seeing that, and then he expects it to shoot back up. And I do, for any of you that have been paying attention to HR 748, that's the third stimulus bill. I'm telling you, pay attention to that, because that's going to be a shot in the arm for the economy. And he brought that up too, where it's going to have a huge impact, regardless of how you feel about it politically or financially or any of that. There's a lot of money there being shot into the economy, which that money goes through to employees, to people that are impacted right now. So I think that's a very positive. As a side note, I do want to bring something up, and I think this can help put things in perspective. One thing that was shared on that webinar, and I wish I could share that webinar with you. I couldn't get permission to share it, but I'll show you. I'll provide a link to their websites, and they have information on there. But because it was a paid webinar, but what they are saying is, what they were warning is, coronavirus isn't as big of a concern to them in the long run. As a matter of fact, they expect the U.S. economy to fully recover by the third quarter, is what they were saying. Now, again, and they warn that data could change, but they're saying by the third quarter, it'll be back where it would have been, is from their projection. What they are saying, though, too, is they said what's having a more negative impact on our economy, which ultimately affects housing for all of us, is the price of oil. And he said that the oil war going on right now between basically Russia and the Middle East is not good for us. And that could have a longer impact than coronavirus. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, all of our oil production, we shifted to increasing U.S. oil production pretty significantly, and but oil production in the United States is at a higher price per gallon than it is in other countries, mostly because of our regulations and safety requirements and things like that. Our cost of labor is significantly higher. And some of our processes for collecting oil, like shale, is a much more expensive process. So we increased our production, but the Russians and the Middle Easterners, because of their little combat, they've really pushed the price of oil way down, which is going to benefit a lot of people in our economy. But the oil industry, which is a big part of our employment base, is really getting crushed.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of that, so the price of oil, last I had checked, per barrel was around $25. And for like the fracking and the domestic production, we need that to be literally actually higher than $50 a barrel. And just as a little side note, 4 weeks ago, a good friend of mine, he runs the major railroad in Ohio here, and he said they've taken a huge hit because they're no longer moving around the fracking sand that's used for the gas production in the wells. So they had already seen a huge hit from that, which for them was a big impact to their rail loads. So again, that can have an impact. So I think that's long run. I think that's something else that we'll want to pay attention to for anyone, especially in markets that are impacted by gas and oil production. So anyhow, but this is where I'm projecting at least through April. I have some projections out past that. I didn't feel that it was good to share them because I don't know what's going to happen. I want to see if HR 748 would pass today. I'm hoping it does. Maybe it did. But I expect things to jump back up quickly. One thing that I want to touch on is some specific things that you have to pay attention to. And now I understand that some of you on here, you might be the owner. You may not pay attention to these things, but you have staff that does, or you have someone on your team that does. Or let's say you don't, your web provider should be able to give you these reports. We do it for many of our clients. As a matter of fact, we can even automate them to where they're emailed to you once a month. But you need to get your traffic at least once a month out of Google Analytics. And you want to see the breakdown of that traffic and start tracking that trend on your own. I think that's just healthy for you to pay attention to that, because that does provide a leading indicator by a few months to understand what's happening in your business. To help you understand what I mean by the leading indicator, I'm going to show you some graphs in a little bit, but like at Delta. So I actually have an 11-month leading indicator that I know if our growth is slowing down or if it's picking up. And I can make business decisions 11 months before I have to in a normal, not in a black swan event like this, but in the normal trend of business. I know 11 months ahead of time. And what I mean by that is basically if I see something happen, if it just triggers and I don't make a quick reaction because I have 11 months, I'll watch for 2 more months. And because what'll happen a lot of times, I'll see, oh, our growth slowed, but 2 months later it picked back up and is pulling back up faster again. So you don't want to make a reaction until you have to, but it's good to have tools like that you know you can make decisions well ahead of time before you have to make them. So number one, get familiar with Google Analytics and the trending. I would recommend for those of you that aren't doing this type of trending to apply it to your financials. And again, I'll give you those resources, but I think it's just really healthy to have those types of numbers and that trending that you can pay attention to in your business. I can tell you for me, it's a comfort knowing I have that. But then also, and I'll show you this too, what phase is your business in and what do you do? Believe it or not, there are 4 phases, and depending on what phase you're in, you have directions on what you can do. So let me show you what that looks like. So again, this comes from ITR Economics, and Brian actually spoke. He spoke at NER a few times on what he sees happening for the residential, real estate business and the business cycle that it's in. But there are 4 phases, and basically, phase A means your business is has been down. Let's say your revenue is down, but it's starting to grow again. That would be phase A, where you're down from your high and you're starting to grow again. Phase B is where you're in a growth mode and it's accelerating. You're growing faster and faster and faster. Again, we'll apply that to revenue. Phase C, you're still growing. So even remember, if you're above the 0, you're still growing year over year, but it's slowing down. And in that phase, again, you want to pay attention to it because you don't want to be caught down here, phase D, where, hey, revenue's down and it's decreasing. That trend is decreasing down. A lot of companies that are reactionary, this is where they make their business decisions in those times. The companies that pay attention to this stuff are making them up here in preparation for this. So again, this is the type of modeling I apply to the analytics I track. I know I had mentioned this. I'm not going to spend much time on this because we're going to send it out. But you basically have Like if you're in phase B, okay, here's the things you should be doing. And granted, there's some things that are, this is businesses in general. You have to kind of filter this and apply it. But you can kind of look at the different phases you'd be in and react accordingly. And again, we'll send this out. But just so you know, the reason I brought all this up and I wanted to show this is, I don't know how many of you felt it, how many of you realized, but I'm telling you, we were tracking that 2020 was going to be an amazing year. If you asked me 5 weeks ago, I was going to say 2020, we're back to the roaring 20s, but it's 2020 this time, and it's in real estate. That's what I was seeing. That's what all the trending was telling me. Believe it or not, that's what ITR was projecting as well, saying that, hey, we're in a really good phase. It's really growing. You know, so these are good times. So, you know, make money now, have fun now, and prepare for when it slows down. You know, so again, watching those things. And the reason I bring that up is because all of that is, this isn't trending. This is actual. So this is leads coming in on the website. And I want to give you additional tools to filter things by, because it's not just about your traffic. And I think you all know that. Who cares if you get 1 million visitors to your site if it provides no business to you? What's really important is leads. And what I want to show is, for this company, really since mid last year, they've had severe inventory constraints. And we saw that result on all the leads coming in. Now, here's what's interesting. So these are web leads. You can see this is just month over month, the total number of leads coming in, you know, had declined from the levels that they were at. But one thing I want to point out is what this doesn't take into account, which we know also increased, was the number of phone calls that were coming in. So you have to start filtering some of the data that you see with the behavior that you know happens in your marketplace. If you're in California and if a listing only stays on the market that day and it has multiple offers, most people will not email in a request. Most people will pick up the phone. They know it's a hot market. They'll send a text. They'll do a phone call because it's that urgent. They know that if they're interested, they know if they don't go see it that day and probably write an offer that day, they missed it. You know, so again, so in situations like
another metric that a lot of brokers would be able to gain access to is if showing time is in your market, they aggregate all of the showings through their lock boxes. So that data is pretty good at watching some trending and would allow you to kind of look at this information, which is a single data point, contrast it with another, you know, sort of connected but asymmetrical data point of showings and say, you know, and that would sort of, that's where I think you would understand something like, oh, internet leads are probably being augmented by phone leads because our showing data hasn't declined in line with this.
Right. So, and any of those data points that you can get are very useful, because sometimes what you will find as well is, what's interesting is you start to track these different data points. And especially as you do, you know, let's say you create a spreadsheet or have someone in your organization create the spreadsheet and you just maintain it, you might find that we'll use the, you know, showing appointments or lockbox data, the trending there. You actually might find that you find a leading indicator by a few months that impacts your revenue. And you can overlay it and see, do I see a similar trend that's off by a few months? You know, that's what a leading indicator is in business. And, you know, so they're very valuable to have because you're making informed decisions much earlier, most likely, than your competition is. And really what's happening here is we did not expect this trend to be happening. This is not because of inventory. This is because of COVID-19. I mean, it's straight up, we can see the massive decrease. I don't know that I have a weekly graph in here, but we can tell you it tailed way off. And so it's pulling down March quite a bit, but this is the projected end. And again, you have to keep in mind, this trend should have continued up. It
How many weeks is that?
These are monthly, Victor.
Yeah, but it looks.
So this is from.
I mean, but
January 2019.
the COVID-19 impact area.
So this right here is about 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're reading quite a bit that's looking at 8 weeks as being a typical window, and that 8 week window is predicated upon historical downtrends in the flu virus and how that dissipates
Mhm.
in the months of March and April. So the flu virus is, you know, something that's very consistent, that's happened year over year over year, and it hits its peak in January and February, and then takes an 8 week tail off to go away. Not that this thing is going to follow that paradigm exactly per se, but that 8 week window of getting, you know, of having the exposure and recovery sort of across America is something that's pretty consistent if you look back decades on the CDC website.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I did mean to mention is the caution I give in watching data and trends is if you were in the Pacific Northwest, this definitely hit you 8 weeks ago. We could see it as we compared different websites and see what's happened with traffic. As a matter of fact, we saw something really confusing where some markets in the Midwest, they had a delayed reaction by literally almost 5 weeks from the Pacific Northwest impact on traffic. So it's
Mhm.
just interesting to see how regionalized that could be, based on what's going on in those regionalized markets. I guess I would equate it, it's almost no different than inventory constraints in certain markets, or pricing pressure in certain markets. We've seen some of that too. So,
I mean, a lot
and
of people live in counties where there have been zero cases of this virus and zero deaths. You know, those, you shouldn't have, you're going to still have fear in the market, but your recovery time should be a lot faster.
yeah, yeah. So I would say, and what we're seeing too is it's just still, at least for this month, it's pulling it down. We expect it to go down a little bit more in the next week, but then, like I said, make that turn and go up. I think what a lot of people are afraid of right now is they don't know what's going on with their jobs, their income. There's all that uncertainty. We don't know how long this is going to go on, all those things. So I think the next week will be really telling for us. So, you know, that's what I think is important beyond the data then is all the things that Victor brought up on that first slide. You know, I think that communication with your team, that focusing on not focusing on today. Yeah, you deal with today, but what can we focus? We'll deal with the business realities, but then what are we focusing on? What are we training on? And what's our approach to moving forward? And one caution I will give, I think all of you know this, but I want to verbalize it, is that the virtual showings and virtual open houses, I think that is a trend that will continue for a little while. I even believe, let's just say we come out of this, let's just say, Lord willing, we look back 3 weeks later and everything's fine. That would be awesome. But I'm telling you, there will be people for weeks to come after that that will be very hesitant, very cautious, very afraid as a result of what they went through, to having people in their house or going into a house. So I think it can change some people's behavior for at least some time to come. We'll see what that looks like. But I think that as you pay attention to different things, training and technology in your business, we're all forced to. I'm doing this from home. It's kind of weird. Not doing it from the office. I live in the office, so it's odd. But we're all forced to do that. So I think, you know, behavior will change. Well, that's what I wanted to go over, some things that you could pay attention to. I did have, when we email out the recording of this, we'll have links to everything that I had mentioned. I'll get those over to Noelle so she can get those out. But does anyone have any questions? Or Victor, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. Victor, did you have anything?
No, I'm solid. This is a really great webinar, Mike. It's very interesting. We've been, you know, like you, I'm really into Google Analytics, and about, I don't know, seems like every couple of years, like every 3 or 4 years, we do this broker website effectiveness study, and yeah, we have been sort of watching traffic on broker websites, and generally overall, because of the extreme popularity of Zillow and Trulia and Realtor.com and Homes.com, more consumers tend to spend a lot of time on those websites before they get to the broker website. So brokers used to enjoy what I would consider to be a direct connection to the real estate consumer at all points in the process of looking for a home. Now the top of the funnel seems to be on those third-party listing websites, and they're not driving traffic to broker websites at all. They used to. Remember when you'd get a deep link back to your website? Those used to actually drive traffic, and now they really don't anymore. But people see the broker branding, and they're driving through neighborhoods, they're seeing broker brands, they know brokers that are operating in their neighborhoods, and they're going to that, broker website because they know the brand. So we're seeing, still a significant, the broker website is not dead. Agent websites are becoming more buyer tools. I mean, agent websites driving leads is a pretty rough thing to get your head around these days. Not that some don't, especially if they're doing a lot of pay-per-click marketing and stuff like that. But a lot of agent websites just aren't performing the way they did, 5 or 6 years ago. But in terms of keywords, one of the metrics that that Mike was looking at before, of the people that are coming to your website through keyword search, predominantly more than 50% of those keywords are related to your brand in some way, like Coldwell Banker Seattle, is going to drive somebody to Coldwell Banker Bain and stuff like that. So those are some of the sort of macroeconomic trends that we see happening as well that impact stuff like this. But this is really fascinating to be able to experience the 35% drop that's impacting people's websites as a result of this virus. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, so it has been pretty big, and actually we are getting a few questions. I did want to mention, so there is a question here. I think it's very valuable, even though this webinar wasn't focused on this. I think it's a phenomenal question. And I'll just read the question. The question is, what platforms do you have experience, with for virtual open houses? And here's what's interesting. So, and we had a question about the platform update we did as well. But let me tell you what our experience is right now and what we're doing and what our experience was, because actually the webinar I did earlier today, just a couple hours ago, was a chat with 3 agents about hosting Facebook Live and their experience and their tips and tricks. Then I gave some, but really there are, at this point, I think there are 4 platforms that are viable. One is Facebook Live. And again, what I'm talking about here is for hosting an open house. Showing is a little bit different, but for an open house, Facebook Live, there's YouTube Premiere. There's also Facebook Premieres, and then Zoom. Now, let me mention YouTube Premiere and Facebook Premieres. What is really neat about those platforms is an agent, and I mentioned these on that webinar a couple hours ago, and there was a lot of interest in those too from all the agents on that webinar. Those 2 platforms there, they allow the agent, so the agent could literally go to the house today, record an open house, do a walkthrough on their phone, then they go to YouTube Premiere or Facebook Premieres and upload it, scheduled to go live, let's say Sunday at 2. And then when it goes live, so then they could share it, they could market it like they would a traditional open house, but it's a virtual open house. And then when it goes live, then they can actually be chatting with anyone watching the video. So live chat, which I think is a really neat feature. So that way they could interact. But there was a lot of interest in those 2. And we're going to be doing training webinars on all of these next week. So those are being prepped right now. I mentioned it. And again, I was shocked at how well that webinar went and all the interest. We had about 100 agents on it. And it was a significant amount of interest in that. And Victor, would you add anything that you're hearing or seeing?
The features that you just talked about on Facebook and YouTube, the Premiere features, those are absolutely what I would consider number 1, the top tier, the best. But a lot of the tours that are happening, especially in areas, these stay-at-home markets like California and New York and others, a lot of agents are using Instagram Live, which works great, but just FaceTime on your phone is incredible as long as both people have iPhones. But that's we're seeing a lot of FaceTime.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think and again, I think segmenting the virtual open house versus a virtual showing,
Yeah.
because virtual showing, we just launched, I couldn't even tell you the five or six different platforms we already support, but like FaceTime is one of them. But I'm a firm believer that one thing I would recommend, I know this might put some of your agents out of their comfort zone a little bit, but I would highly recommend, picking the five big video chat platforms, like FaceTime, like WhatsApp is another one.
Oh yeah, if you're on an iPhone and you have a client who's using an Android device, absolutely WhatsApp. That's
So, but giving the consumer the choice of what to use, I think that's really important. So, and those platforms are easy to use. The apps are really, really easy. And even using Zoom, they can have a free account for one-to-one. But anyhow, I think those are really good. And I think you're gonna. But the one takeaway that I would give that I did hear from all the agents that were successful at it is be sure to promote it. Promote it as if you were promoting a normal one. And actually, I think the agents gave some really something else that was really insightful and timely. What they said was, during these times, be careful how you position it. Position it in these times as if, hey, we can still do this. I'm here to help. Don't try and tout it as we're the market leader. You be sensitive to the times and what people are going through. I think that's really important. So, and all of them really agreed with that. So great. Any other questions, or Victor, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. Send in your comments about things that you guys are doing in your market. Maybe we can include this in a future webinar. So it's pretty cool. Like, it's great to see all these people on.
Yeah. So thank you, Victor. I'm glad we could put this together so quickly. And thank you everyone for attending. We will send out the recording and an email with all the information I referenced in the next day here. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Bye-bye.